There are currently over 320 different archetypes in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'm going to tell you about 6 of the ones I'm pretty sure you forgot. Now when creating this list, I wanted to give myself a set of guidelines, so I set the criteria to 3 separate things. Number 1, I wanted you to be able to build a pure enough version of the deck, meaning it had to have enough cards to be able to build pretty much a whole deck with. So with things like Butter Spy or Bouncer, I pretty much eliminated those types of decks immediately because as forgettable as they are, they only got like 5 cards per deck, and they just really didn't have enough to build a whole deck just around those cards. I also wanted to be fair and give a deck a few years to develop, find its way. If a deck just released recently and sucks and is forgettable, I didn't put it on the list because you never know what could come down the pipeline in the future. So within, 2-3 years, I think it's pretty safe to say whether or not a deck is going to be good or forgotten. So for example, something like Gold Pride or Valance that just got cards coming out within the last year are not going to be on this list because they just haven't been out long enough to really be forgotten all the way. And finally, to narrow it down just a little bit more, if I had a few decks I was trying to cut out of the list just to make it a little bit less bulky, I came down to lore. If the deck had some type of interesting lore or story that it was based on, or the flavor of the deck was really great, I felt like it was even more of a tragedy if it was forgotten, because it seemed like some actual effort may have been put into building a deck that people would like, and it just didn't pan out that way. So first on the list of decks I'm pretty sure you forgot about, we have Tearlaments. Alright, that was kind of a low blow, but actually to start the list at number 6, we got Dual Avatar. First debuting in 2020's Phantom Rage, Dual Avatar is an archetype of light warrior monsters focused on swarming the field with fusion monsters. This is achieved through spell and trap effects that provide recursion and mass token generation. These tokens are super necessary because of the deck currently only having 2 main deck monsters. Where this deck falls short is in its massive reliance on using only in-archetype resources to build its boss monsters, while also restricting you from teching in forms of extra deck summoning outside of fusion monsters. I considered cutting this deck from the list entirely after realizing that Duel Links just recently released them, which likely increased their visibility to a lot of people. I eventually decided against this because Duel Links and actual Yu-Gi-Oh! Are so very different that the decks are just not the same at all. Coming in at number 5, we have the originators of the Excavate mechanic. Coming out of 2013's Legacy of the Valiant, Sylvans are an archetype of little plant guys, centered around excavating or revealing cards from the top of the deck to gain effects based on what has been excavated or by being excavated themselves. They've even received support as recently as 2022 in the form of Sylvan Dance Peon in Dimension Force, providing easier access to Alcei and Aurea, but it has seemingly done little for the actual Sylvan deck, and has fallen to just being generic plant support. Of all the decks on this list, I think this one probably has the most potential to see revival in the future, just because of the sheer number of cards available in the archetype at this moment. At number 4, we have Tindangle. These guys are based on the Hounds of Tindalos, which are creatures from the Cthulhu mythos. In these stories, the Hounds will hunt down and kill anyone messing with time travel, which has to be one of the sickest archetype inspirations for any deck in the game. Unfortunately, that's where the upside ends. This is a flip effect based deck, making it inherently very slow. The effects on the individual monsters are pretty good, and would be very good if you were able to cheat past the flip effect condition in any way, making it a great swarm strategy. But until then, they just don't quite do it fast enough. Even the boss monster, Tindangle Acute Cerberus, falls at least partially in line with the rest of the deck by creating advantage based on graveyard presence and attack manipulation, as well as with token generation. In all, the only huge issue with this deck is that it is 90% flip effects, and there will likely never be a card introduced that can balance flip effects with the rest of the game. Number 3 on this list was Konami's Hail Mary attempt at creating a Gemini strategy that didn't suck. They failed. The Chemicritters are all named after chemicals and chemical compounds, and have a unique attribute and typing combination. For example, Carbo Crab is a fire aqua monster. Their Gemini effects are actually pretty good, but similar to Tindangle's struggling with so many flip effects, Gemini monsters have the inherent disadvantage of needing to normal summon all of their monsters twice just to see some sort of return. The only difference here is that you lose an opportunity each turn to build your board by having to summon the same monster you just summoned last turn. This will also give your opponent 2 turns to decide how to combat your deck, and on the second of those turns, they have full knowledge of what you're slowly trying to do. At number 2, we have Hazy Flame. The Hazy Flame are a collection of level 6 fire monsters with a loose focus around summoning them without tributing to act as a rank 6 toolbox. Apart from that, the main deck monsters have a broad number of effects that don't really point the deck in a specific direction. Even the boss monster, Basiltrice, does little in continuing the few things the deck does well. With the goal of the deck being confused even within itself, it was no wonder that the deck just could never find legs. And finally, for the most forgotten deck in the game, we have 2015's Gradles out of Dimension of Chaos. The Gradle are a species of parasitic aliens that crash landed on Earth. After arriving, they began to take over the bodies of native animals, as seen in the main deck monsters lineup, in order to avoid being attacked. The flavor of the lore is represented in the archetype, with the main focus of the deck being to snatch-steal your opponent's monsters when a Gradle is destroyed by a battle or card effect correlating to that monster's color. Eagle is monsters, Alligator is spells, and Cobra is traps. This focus falls apart a little with the boss monster Gradle Dragon having a board wiping and floating effect, which doesn't fall in line with the rest of the deck's focus. That and the deck's reliance on the opponent's playstyle makes it hard to keep consistent, and its lack of a clear win condition seems to have pushed it to the back of players' minds for the last 8 years. Now, if you happen to be one of the mad lads that's actually trying to make one of these forgotten decks work, leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear about how you could possibly manage to make something like that happen. If you want to hear me talk shit about your favorite deck sometime in the future, make sure you subscribe and like the video, because I'd hate for you to miss out on that. But until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you have a good one.